I never thought a simple walk home from the corner store would lead to something unforgettable. It was almost midnight when I saw Marcus stumbling near Bailey's pub, gripping a lamppost like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Most people crossed the street to avoid him. A couple even laughed as they passed by. But I recognized that jacket, dark green with a torn pocket on the left side. Marcus lived 4 houses down from me on Birch Avenue. My dad used to say something when I was growing up. He'd tell me that walking away from someone who needs help is the easiest thing in the world. Anyone can do that. The hard part is stopping when everyone else keeps moving. I thought about those words as I watched Marcus try to take a step forward and nearly fall into the street. "Hey, Marcus," I called out, jogging over to him. "You okay?" He turned his head slowly, like it took all his energy just to look at me. His eyes were glassy and unfocused. "I'm good," he mumbled, his words thick and heavy, "just heading home." "Let me give you a hand," I said, reaching for his arm. He pulled away weakly. "Don't need help. I can walk just fine." But he couldn't. When he tried to prove it, his legs wobbled and gave out. I caught him before he hit the pavement, feeling his full weight press against my shoulder. He was heavier than I expected, and the smell of whiskey hit me hard. "All right, buddy," I said, adjusting my grip. "We're doing this together." Marcus and I weren't close. We'd lived on the same street for about 3 years, but we'd never had a real conversation. Sometimes we'd wave when one of us was checking the mail. Once he helped me jump my car battery when it died in my driveway. Another time I signed for a package that had been delivered to my house by mistake. That was about it. We were just 2 people who happened to live near each other. Getting him to my car felt like it took forever. Every few steps, Marcus would stop and try to say something important, but the words faded into nothing. The November air was cold and sharp, biting at my face. My breath came out in white clouds, and I could feel Marcus shivering even through his jacket. "Why are you doing this?" he asked suddenly, his voice quiet and confused. I didn't know how to answer. I could have called him a cab. I could have asked the bartender for help. I could have kept walking to my apartment like I'd planned. But something inside me said that wouldn't be right. "Because you'd do the same for me," I said, even though I wasn't sure it was true. We finally reached my car, and I helped Marcus into the passenger seat. His head fell back against the headrest and his eyes closed. For a second, I thought he might already be asleep, but then he opened them again and stared at me. "You're a good person," he whispered. I didn't feel like a good person. I felt tired and cold and worried about what would happen next. But I closed his door and walked around to the driver's side. Through the pub window, I could see people inside laughing and dancing. Music thumped through the walls. Out here, everything felt quiet and lonely. I started the engine and pulled onto the street. Marcus didn't talk much during the drive. He mumbled a few things I couldn't understand. Something about forgetting to pay a bill. Something about broken things that couldn't be fixed. I just nodded and kept my eyes on the road. The streets were wet from earlier rain, and the streetlights reflected off the puddles, making everything look slick and dark. "Turn left here," Marcus said suddenly, lifting one heavy arm to point. I followed his directions until we pulled up to a small house tucked behind a row of tall trees. The porch light was on, glowing yellow in the darkness. I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment, wondering what I should do next. Should I honk and wait for someone to come out? Should I help him to the door? Marcus answered that question by trying to open his door and nearly falling face first onto the driveway. I jumped out fast, my heart pounding. This was going to be harder than I thought. Getting Marcus out of the car and up to his front door felt impossible. His feet kept dragging along the concrete, and twice he nearly pulled both of us down. I kept one arm wrapped tight around his waist while his arm hung over my shoulders. Together, we shuffled forward like we were in some awkward 3-legged race. "Almost there," I kept saying. "Just a few more steps." When we finally reached the front door, my hands were full, holding Marcus upright. I couldn't knock or ring the doorbell, so I gently kicked the door with my foot. Nothing happened. I tried again, a little harder. Footsteps sounded inside. The door swung open, and a woman stood there. She looked to be in her late 50s, with short gray hair and tired eyes. She was wearing a loose sweater and slippers. The moment she saw Marcus leaning against me, her whole face changed. "Oh, thank God," she breathed, placing a hand over her heart. "I've been so worried." She rushed forward to help me, and together we managed to get Marcus through the doorway. The house smelled like lavender and vanilla candles. A small lamp glowed in the corner, casting soft shadows on the walls. "I tried texting him 5 times," she said as we guided Marcus toward the sofa. "When he didn't answer, I didn't know if something bad had happened." Quote, "We lowered Marcus onto the brown sofa as gently as we could. His head rolled to the side, and his breathing grew slow and steady. I grabbed a throw blanket from the armrest and spread it over him. He looked peaceful lying there, like he'd finally stopped fighting whatever battle had been going on inside his head. The woman stood watching him, her hands clasped together. Then she turned to me, and I saw tears shining in her eyes. "Thank you so much for bringing him home," she said softly. "You didn't have to do that." "Most people wouldn't have." I shrugged, feeling awkward and out of place. "It's really not a big deal. I just wanted to make sure he got back safely." But she shook her head. "No, most people wouldn't have. Trust me on that." Something about the way she said it made me stop. There was weight behind her words, like she knew something I didn't. "Is he going to be okay?" I asked. Her expression softened as she looked back at Marcus sleeping on the sofa. Then she turned to me again, as if making an important decision. "Can I tell you something?" she asked quietly. I nodded, even though part of me wanted to say no and just leave. "Sometimes knowing things makes life more complicated." She took a deep breath. "Marcus lost his father 3 months ago," she said gently. "I lost my husband. It was sudden, a stroke in the middle of the night." My stomach dropped. I had no idea. "I'm so sorry," I said, and I meant it. She nodded slowly. "He doesn't talk about it. Not to the neighbors, not even to me sometimes. He keeps everything locked inside and pretends he's fine, but he's not fine. He hasn't been for a long time." I looked back at Marcus on the sofa, and suddenly everything made sense. The drinking, the lost look in his eyes. He wasn't just drunk, he was hurting. The woman met my gaze again, her voice trembling slightly. "Thank you," she said softly. "You brought my son home, and tonight you gave me something I haven't felt in a long time." "What's that?" I asked. She smiled through her tears. "Hope." The word lingered in the air long after she said it. Hope. I sat there quietly, holding my mug of tea, unsure how a stranger's kindness had come to mean so much to her. But as I looked around the warm kitchen, filled with memories and photographs, I began to understand. This wasn't just about helping Marcus home. It was about reminding someone that they weren't alone. We talked for a long time that night. She told me stories about Marcus as a child, about family vacations and Sunday dinners, about the way her husband used to sing off-key while cooking breakfast. Her voice softened when she spoke of him, like every memory was both a comfort and a wound. I listened carefully, feeling honored that she trusted me with something so personal. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. "You reminded me tonight that there are still good people in this world," she said gently, placing her hand on my arm. "Real kindness, the kind that shows up when it's hard, that's something I won't forget." I stepped outside into the cold November air, my breath fogging in front of me. The street looked the same as always, quiet and still. But something inside me had shifted. As I walked to my car, I felt lighter, as if I had become part of something bigger than myself. My phone lit up just as I was about to drive away. An unknown number. I hesitated before opening the message. "Thank you again." He woke up and asked how he got home. I told him a neighbor cared enough to bring him back safely. He smiled for the first time in weeks. I stared at the screen, my heart tightening. A smile. Something so simple, yet it meant everything. I typed back slowly. "Glad he's okay. Tell him I'll check in soon." The weekend passed slowly, my thoughts returning again and again to that small house on Birch Avenue. I kept thinking about Marcus's mother, about the sadness in her eyes and the warmth in her voice, about the quiet hope she had placed in a stranger. By Monday evening, I found myself walking toward Marcus's house without planning to. My feet carried me there as if they already knew the way. When I reached his driveway, I hesitated. What if he didn't want to see me? What if I was making things awkward? Before I could turn around, the front door opened. Marcus stood there. He looked tired, with messy hair and dark circles under his eyes, but he was standing strong. When our eyes met, he smiled, and the warmth in that smile caught me off guard. "Hey," he said quietly, his voice raspy. "Come in." I followed him inside. The house felt warmer in the evening light, softer somehow. We sat in the living room, him in the chair and me on the sofa where he had slept just days before. "My mom told me everything," he said, looking down at his hands. "About how you found me, about bringing me home and staying to talk with her." "It's okay," I said gently. "I'm just glad you're all right." He shook his head. "It's not okay. I need to tell you something, and it's hard to say." I waited quietly. "Friday night wasn't the first time I've gotten that drunk," he admitted. "It's been happening a lot, maybe twice a week, sometimes more." His voice trembled as he spoke, and I could see the shame in his eyes. "My mom's been calling me every day just to make sure I'm still alive," he continued. "She found empty bottles in my recycling bin last week. I promised her I'd stop, but I didn't. I couldn't." The room felt heavy with his confession. Outside, a dog barked somewhere down the street, and the sound of passing cars drifted through the window. "Saturday morning, when I woke up on that sofa, it all came back," he said softly. "Being outside the pub, not being able to walk straight, you showing up out of nowhere." His eyes filled with tears, and he quickly wiped them away. "You barely know me," he continued. "We're not friends. We just live on the same street. But you still cared enough to make sure I got home safe when everyone else walked past me." "Anyone would have done it," I said gently. "No," he replied firmly, "they wouldn't have." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "After you left, my mom and I talked for hours," he said. "Really talked for the first time since my dad died. She told me I was scaring her, that she couldn't lose me too." His voice broke. "And you know what? I realized I was scaring myself. I've been so angry and sad and lost that I was willing to drink myself into nothing just to stop feeling it." I didn't interrupt. Sometimes people don't need advice. They just need someone to listen. "Sunday morning, I did something I should have done months ago," he said, looking up at me. "I called a grief counselor. My first session is on Thursday." A smile spread across my face. "That's really big, Marcus. I'm proud of you." He laughed softly, the sound filled with relief. "Don't be too proud yet. I haven't gone to the appointment. But I'm going to try. For my mom. For myself. And maybe a little because you showed me that people still care." We sat in silence for a moment, the kind that felt comfortable rather than awkward. Outside, the evening sky turned a soft shade of blue as the sun dipped below the horizon. "My dad died 3 months ago," Marcus said quietly. "Did my mom tell you?" I nodded. "It was a stroke," he continued. "I was there. I heard the thump and ran into the bedroom. I called the ambulance. I did CPR. I did everything right, but it wasn't enough." His voice trembled. "He died right there in front of me, and I couldn't save him." "That wasn't your fault," I said softly. "I know that up here," he said, tapping his head. "But I don't know it here." He placed his hand over his heart. I moved to the chair beside him. "Your dad would be proud of you for getting help. For trying to heal. That takes strength." He looked at me, his eyes red but hopeful. "You really think so?" "I know so." We talked for another hour about his father, about the motorcycle they had been restoring together, about his counseling appointment and the fear of facing his grief. The more he spoke, the lighter he seemed, as if sharing his pain made it easier to carry. When I finally stood to leave, Marcus walked me to the door. "Thank you," he said. "For everything, for caring when you didn't have to." "That's what neighbors do," I replied with a smile. "Or at least what they should do." He hesitated for a moment, then smiled back. "Would you want to grab coffee sometime?" he asked. "Like actually hang out, not just wave from across the street." I felt a warmth spread through my chest. "I'd like that," I said. 3 weeks later, Saturday morning coffee in Marcus's backyard became our routine. We sat in old lawn chairs beneath the oak trees, watching squirrels chase each other across the branches. Sometimes we talked about serious things. Other times, we laughed about potholes on our street or argued over the best pizza in town. Marcus looked different now. Not completely healed, but lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He smiled more often, and the sadness in his eyes was slowly fading. One Thursday evening, my phone buzzed while I was making dinner. An unknown number again. I opened the message and felt my heart swell. I wanted to give you an update. Marcus is doing so much better. He goes to counseling every week and hasn't missed a single session. Last night at dinner, he said something that made me cry. He said, "You're the reason he's still fighting." I sank into a chair, the steam from the stove curling into the air around me. "Changed our lives," she added. "I don't think you understand how much you mean to us." I stared at the screen, overwhelmed by the weight of her words. All I had done was help someone get home. It seemed so small, so ordinary, yet somehow it had changed everything. I typed back carefully, "I'm really glad Marcus is doing better. Tell him I'm proud of him. That takes courage. And thank you for reminding me why small things matter." Her reply came almost instantly. "You're a good person. Marcus is lucky to have you in his life." I smiled softly as I set my phone down, unaware that the bond growing between Marcus and me was about to become something neither of us expected. The bond between Marcus and me continued to grow in quiet, unexpected ways. What started as simple Saturday morning coffee in his backyard soon became something I looked forward to all week. The air was crisp, the oak trees rustled softly above us, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee drifted between our lawn chairs. Sometimes we talked about grief and healing. Other times we laughed about potholes, bad movies, and the strange habits of our neighbors. Marcus looked different now, not completely healed, but lighter, like someone had lifted a heavy weight from his shoulders. He smiled more often, and his eyes no longer carried that distant, empty look I had first seen outside Bailey's pub. Every week he told me something new he'd learned in counseling. Sometimes it was about forgiveness. Other times it was about letting himself feel sadness without drowning in it. One Thursday evening, my phone buzzed while I was making dinner. An unknown number again. I knew who it was before I even opened the message. "I wanted to give you an update. Marcus is doing so much better. He hasn't missed a single counseling session. Last night at dinner, he told me something that made me cry. He said, 'You're the reason he's still fighting.' I had to sit down at the kitchen table, steam from the boiling pasta fogging the air around me. Changed our lives," she added. "I don't think you understand how much you mean to us." I stared at the screen, overwhelmed by the weight of her words. All I had done was help someone get home. It seemed so small, so ordinary, but maybe that's how the most important things happen. Not through grand gestures, but through quiet choices we make when nobody is watching. I typed back slowly, "I'm really glad Marcus is doing better. Tell him I'm proud of him. That takes courage. And thank you for reminding me why small things matter." Her response came quickly. "You're a good person. Marcus is lucky to have you in his life." The next few weeks brought even more changes. Marcus began greeting neighbors again, not just with quick waves, but with real conversations. Mrs. Chun told me she saw him helping Mr. Rodriguez carry his trash cans back from the curb. Little things, but they added up. It felt like watching someone slowly step back into the light. One Saturday morning, when I arrived for coffee, Marcus wasn't in the backyard. I found him in the garage instead, standing in front of an old motorcycle covered with dust and memories. Tools were spread across a workbench, and his hands were already smudged with grease. "I'm going to finish it," he said when he noticed me. "The motorcycle. Dad and I were so close to being done. I think it's time." His voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly. This wasn't just about fixing an engine. It was about facing a memory he had avoided for months. "Need any help?" I asked. He smiled. "Actually, yeah. I have no idea what half these parts do anymore. Dad was the expert. I just handed him tools and tried not to mess things up." We spent the entire morning in that garage. Marcus would pick up a part and tell me a story about it. How his dad had found a rare carburetor at a swap meet 2 towns over. how they had argued about the color of the gas tank, how his father had laughed so hard he snorted when Marcus accidentally dropped a wrench on his own foot. Some stories made him smile. Others made his eyes shine with tears. But he kept working, kept talking, kept remembering. And I realized that this was what healing looked like. Not forgetting the pain, but learning how to carry it without letting it destroy you. During one of our evening coffee sessions, Marcus opened up even more about counseling. We sat on his back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "It's harder than I thought it would be," he admitted, wrapping both hands around his mug. Talking about Dad. "Some days I leave those sessions feeling worse than when I walked in." "Is that normal?" I asked. "My counselor says it is. Healing isn't a straight line. Some days you feel better, some days you don't, but you're still moving forward." A bird landed on the fence nearby before fluttering away into the fading light. "What's the hardest part?" I asked quietly. Marcus stared into his coffee for a long time. "Forgiving myself," he finally said, "for not being there enough before he died. For all the times I said I was too busy. For every phone call I let go to voicemail because I thought I'd call back later." His voice grew rough. "And for choosing whiskey instead of facing the pain. For putting my mom through all that worry when she was already grieving." "You're dealing with it now," I said gently. "That's what matters." "My counselor says the same thing," he replied with a faint smile. "She calls it self-compassion. Treating yourself with the same kindness you'd show a friend. Sounds easy, but it's not." "Your dad would be proud of you," I said, "for getting help. For trying." Marcus looked at me, and for the first time I saw something stronger than grief in his eyes. "Hope. Thanks," he said softly. "That actually helps." Another week passed before he sent me a message late one Friday night. "My mom wants to cook dinner for you. She's been asking for weeks. Says she wants to properly thank you. Tomorrow night, if you're free." I smiled as I read it. "I'd love that." "What time?" 6:30. Fair warning, she goes overboard with food. Hope you're hungry. Saturday evening, I walked down to Marcus's house carrying a bottle of wine. It felt strange to show up empty-handed, though I wondered if it was appropriate. When Marcus opened the door, he looked healthier than I had ever seen him. His eyes were clear and bright, and his smile was genuine. "Come in," he said warmly. "Mom's been cooking since noon. I think she made enough food for 20 people. The smell hit me as soon as I stepped inside. Garlic, herbs, and fresh bread filled the air. Marcus's mother appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron dusted with flour. The moment she saw me, her face lit up, and she pulled me into a hug that caught me completely off guard. "I'm so glad you came," she said warmly. "I've been wanting to do this for weeks." "It's really no trouble," I said, handing her the wine. "You didn't have to do that," she replied with a smile. "But thank you. Now come sit down. Dinner's almost ready." The dining room table was set with cloth napkins, candles, and polished dishes. It looked elegant and welcoming, like something from a small family restaurant. When we sat down, Marcus's mother brought out dish after dish. Homemade lasagna layered with cheese and rich meat sauce, fresh bread still warm from the oven, a salad filled with vegetables from her garden, roasted vegetables that smelled incredible. "Mom, this is too much," Marcus said with a laugh. "Nonsense," she replied, sitting down. "We have a guest, a very special guest." We passed dishes around and filled our plates. For a few minutes, no one spoke. We simply enjoyed the meal. The lasagna was incredible, the kind of food that makes you close your eyes and savor every bite. "This is amazing," I said. "Seriously, the best lasagna I've ever had." Marcus's mother beamed. "It's my husband's recipe." "Well, technically his mother's, but he's the one who taught me how to make it. The secret is using 3 types of cheese and letting the sauce simmer for hours." Dad was weirdly serious about his lasagna, Marcus added with a grin. He'd taste the sauce every 20 minutes and add a pinch of something. Drove Mom crazy. "I wasn't crazy," she corrected, laughing. "I was proud. You can't rush good sauce." As we ate, they shared stories. Happy ones this time. Family vacations where everything went wrong but they laughed anyway. The time Marcus's father tried to install a ceiling fan and nearly brought down the entire ceiling. Sunday dinners that lasted for hours because nobody wanted to leave the table. He would have liked you, Marcus's mother said suddenly, looking at me. My husband, I mean. He always said you could tell a lot about a person by how they treat strangers. She set down her fork and smiled softly. That's who he was. And that's who you are. After dinner, we moved to the living room for dessert. Marcus's mother brought out homemade tiramisu and fresh coffee. We talked about movies, books, and plans for the upcoming holidays. Somewhere between the tiramisu and our second cups of coffee, something shifted. This wasn't just about me helping Marcus anymore. It had become something mutual. They had given me something too, a sense of belonging. "Can I show you something?" Marcus asked suddenly, standing up. We followed him into the garage. In the center stood the motorcycle, covered by a tarp. Marcus grabbed the edge and pulled it away in one swift motion. The bike gleamed under the lights, red and chrome, polished and perfect. "You finished it?" his mother whispered, her hand covering her mouth. "Finished it last night," Marcus said quietly. "Every bolt, every wire. Exactly how Dad planned it." He ran his hand gently along the seat. "I kept his notes," he added. It felt like he was right there with me, telling me what to do. His mother stepped forward and touched the handlebar with trembling fingers. "He would be so proud of you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you," Marcus said, turning to me. "Not just the motorcycle. Any of it." "You did the hard work," I replied. "I just drove you home." "You did more than that," his mother said firmly. "You reminded us that kindness still exists." She hugged me, and this time Marcus joined her. We stood there together, three people who had once been strangers, holding on tightly in the quiet glow of the garage lights. When we finally let go, Marcus laughed softly, wiping his eyes. "Okay," he said, smiling. "Enough crying. Let's go finish that coffee before it gets cold." We returned to the living room and talked for another hour about hopes, plans, and the future. The conversation flowed easily, like we had known each other for years instead of weeks. When it was finally time to leave, I stood reluctantly. I didn't want the evening to end. It felt too warm, too meaningful, too much like belonging. Marcus walked me to the door. "Thank you for coming," he said. "This meant a lot to Mom, to both of us." "Thank you for inviting me," I replied with a smile. "Your mom's an amazing cook." He laughed. "She really is. Hey, next Saturday, we should take the motorcycle for a ride. Nothing crazy, just around the neighborhood. I think Dad would like that." "I'd love that," I said. As I walked down the driveway, the streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. The night air was cool, but I barely noticed. I felt lighter, happier, as if I had found something I hadn't realized I was missing. What I didn't know then was that the most unforgettable part of this story was still waiting to unfold. The following Saturday arrived with a soft golden sunrise that painted Birch Avenue in warm light. I woke earlier than usual, feeling a quiet excitement I hadn't felt in years. As I stepped outside, the crisp morning air filled my lungs, and I caught sight of Marcus standing in his driveway beside the gleaming red motorcycle. He looked different, healthier, stronger. His eyes were clear, and his smile was easy, the kind that came from somewhere deep and honest. "Morning," he called, handing me a helmet. "Ready?" I took the helmet, smiling back. "Ready." The engine roared to life, low and steady, echoing down the quiet street. As we rode through the neighborhood, the wind rushed past us, cool and invigorating. The world seemed brighter, sharper, like everything had been washed clean. Marcus rode carefully, his hands steady on the handlebars, his posture confident. I could almost imagine his father riding beside us, proud and smiling. When we returned, his mother stood on the porch with a cup of coffee in her hands. She waved as we pulled into the driveway, her eyes shining with happiness. The smile on her face was warmer than the morning sun. "He would have loved that," she said softly when Marcus removed his helmet. "I know he would have." Marcus nodded, his voice quiet but steady. It felt like he was with us. We spent the rest of the morning in the backyard, sipping coffee and talking beneath the shade of the oak trees. Laughter came easily now, filling the space that grief had once occupied. The air felt lighter, and for the first time since I had known them, peace seemed to settle gently around us. Over the next few weeks, our lives continued to intertwine. Saturday coffee turned into Sunday dinners. Casual conversations turned into long evening walks. Marcus and I talked about everything, from childhood memories to hopes for the future. With each passing day, our friendship deepened, growing into something warmer, something neither of us expected. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, we sat together on his back porch, watching the sky fade into soft shades of pink and gold. The world was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic and the rustling leaves overhead. "Funny how things change," Marcus said softly, staring out at the horizon. "A few months ago, I didn't think I'd ever feel normal again. I didn't think I'd ever feel happy." "You've come a long way," I said gently. He turned to look at me, his expression thoughtful. "I wouldn't have made it this far without you." "You did the hard work," I replied. "You chose to heal." He smiled, but there was something deeper in his eyes now, something vulnerable and sincere. "Maybe," he said quietly. "But you showed me that I wasn't alone. And sometimes, that's what makes all the difference." His words lingered in the warm evening air, and for a moment neither of us spoke. The silence felt comfortable, filled with unspoken understanding. Then he cleared his throat softly. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Of course." He hesitated, searching my face. "Would you want to have dinner with me sometime? Not as neighbors, not just as friends." My heart skipped, caught off guard by the tenderness in his voice. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the lost man I had met outside Bailey's pub, but someone strong, kind, and hopeful. I smiled. "I'd like that," I said. Relief and happiness softened his expression, and he laughed quietly, the sound warm and genuine. "Good," he said, "because I've been wanting to ask you for weeks." That night marked the beginning of something new. What started as a simple act of kindness slowly blossomed into a relationship built on trust, understanding, and shared healing. We took things slowly, learning each other's rhythms, discovering comfort in quiet moments and joy in small adventures. Marcus continued his counseling, growing stronger with each passing week. His mother welcomed me into their lives with open arms, treating me like family from the very beginning. Holidays were spent around her dining table, filled with laughter, stories, and the comforting aroma of her famous lasagna. One winter evening, months later, snow fell gently over Birch Avenue, covering the street in a blanket of white. Inside Marcus's house, warmth and light filled the rooms. We sat together by the fireplace, his mother knitting quietly in her chair, while Marcus and I shared a blanket on the couch. "Do you remember the night you brought him home?" she asked, suddenly, smiling at me. I laughed softly. "How could I forget?" She looked at her son, then back at me, her eyes shining with gratitude. "That night changed everything. You didn't just help Marcus. You helped both of us find hope again." Marcus reached for my hand, his fingers warm and steady around mine. "You saved me," he said quietly. I shook my head gently. "No, you saved yourself. I just happened to be there." He smiled, squeezing my hand. "Then I'm grateful you were." As the fire crackled softly and snow drifted outside the window, I felt a sense of peace settle deep within me. What began as a simple walk home from the corner store had grown into something extraordinary. It had brought healing, friendship, love, and a sense of belonging I never expected to find. Later that night, as I stood on the front porch preparing to leave, Marcus's mother wrapped me in a warm embrace. "You'll always have a place here," she said softly. "You're part of this family now." Her words filled my heart with warmth as I stepped out into the snowy night. Marcus walked beside me down the driveway, his hand gently slipping into mine. "Stay a little longer," he said softly. I smiled up at him, my heart full. "I'm not going anywhere." We stood there beneath the falling snow, the streetlights casting a gentle glow around us. In that quiet moment, I realized how much had changed since that night outside Bailey's pub. A single choice to stop and help someone had rippled outward, touching lives in ways I never could have imagined. As we walked back toward the house together, I felt certain of one thing. Sometimes the most unforgettable journeys begin with the smallest acts of kindness. And sometimes, all it takes to change a life is simply choosing to care.